So, what should the listeners on WXJM know about you? Do they need to know anything about you, really?
I'll treat this as a sort of like self-introduction, I guess. My name's Marty, he, she, they, and through my work, my goal is basically to spread literacy and dispel hegemony through queering homogenized design practices, such as screen printing. There's a subtext to everything I do. I center queer theory and a queer audience foremost within my work. It's not always overt, but that like informs the visual language that my design embodies. I'd say I am overt. I'm unpredictable. I'm transgressive, and I know exactly what I'm doing.
That's not many people can say that, especially in the academic world, especially in graphic design. Like having a very specific way that you're going is I feel like is really powerful in the design world these days.
Definitely.
So I follow you on Instagram, and all of my questions are basically going to be kind of because I stalk you on Instagram a little bit. So if you were to make a newspaper classified ad, I've seen some of your Marty's Classifieds.
Martin's Classifieds.
To advertise your creative philosophy, what would this newspaper classified say?
I recently just did a project called I Don't Talk with Empty Words. Honestly, I feel like that would fit the visual language that Martin's Classifieds was going for really well. It's about the appropriation of queer language, and it's a mantra that I've just kind of been saying in my head the last, 6 months. It's relevant to how I articulate and behave as the person that I am. In general, I'm not someone who likes to say meaningless shit. I hate when people will, say things that are already being said. If you talk to me about AI, I will kill myself. That's something a mutual posted. Shout out, Chris. I hate when people state radical things, especially with no research to back it up, or to be performative, or to slap radical for the sake of being radical,
Yeah. And I see that a lot on Instagram, weirdly.
Mm-hmm. The Instagram.
The Instagram activists who will, I don't know, reshare things that maybe are not necessarily backed by research.
It's performative solidarity, and that's annoying.
It is, yeah. And something I see in your work is a lot of, you really invest in the research, in, I don't have good words for it, but I see that there's a lot of things behind your work that are informing it, versus just whatever comes out.
In my junior reviews, one of my professors kind of decked me and said, the first thing you do when you start a project is you go on JSTOR, and nobody else really does that. And I was like, yeah.
Yeah, not in design, at least.
Not in graphic design, not in the public art school zeitgeist, no.
Here's another question about Martin's Classifieds. How are you reimagining this? I know this was probably a past project, but I'm still curious about it. How are you reimagining this iconic style that has been seen everywhere for the past, pretty much our whole lifetimes?
Well, it was sort of me channeling that practice of just making the most eye-catching, eye-melting visual language possible, and not necessarily through the crazy lettering that I got blown up off of, that Marty style. That's kind of been synonymous to me for a while. I was projecting a lot of my own emotions into it, and the crazy music I was listening to. You'll see a lot of electronica songs quoted throughout the Martin's Classifieds publication. I reference Earth Eater in one of the web-based ads, her song Super Soaker. It was very much a fun kind of thing, but also I was projecting sort of this chaos that I had going on in my personal life. I haven't gotten exactly to how I'll be recontextualizing it yet, because school and all that. It's definitely something I want to revisit in the future, probably post-grad when I have time.
Yeah.
But I know I want to get more queer with it, because when I was first researching, references, I did look at gay magazines and queer classifieds a lot, and in the back of my mind, I had this sort of background, pin in that idea of these modes of discrete communication that queer people had to rely on back in the day, during, the heyday of queer zines. And that's something I definitely want to investigate further, discretion in the past.
Definitely. I often, when I look at your work and when I read about what you're reading, it seems like it is something, especially the queer nature of it, it's something that is kind of hidden away and kind of hard to find. Mm-hmm. Like, how do you find some of your resources that are maybe buried by time or just repressed by other people?
Honestly, it takes just a lot of work on my end. For one, people need to put down their damn phone and go to the library because,
yes.
It is out there if, for one, you just search hard enough, Google Scholar versus, just Googling shit. Put down the Instagram Reels and look at Letterboxd for lists of, iconic queer films. And honestly, for me, like, how it kind of just started was listening to drag queens, like the Trixie and Katya podcast, and, like, hearing them make references to, like, because, they're older queers. You listen to the references that elder queers make and investigate those. That's kind of how it got started,
Yeah.
I, would hear this sort of, name mentioned over and over again, or this, event, and I'd be like, what is that? I want to know. So that's a good place to start.
Definitely. Here's a question that is, once again, because I stalk your Instagram. Do you still do street art and graffiti? Why or why not?
I want to preface this real quick by saying that graffiti is not inherently synonymous with substance use or a juvenile nature. There's lots of sober graffiti artists. I'm just not equating that sort of state of mind that I was in back in the day with graffiti. Just disclaimer. The short answer is I just have a lot I could lose now. It is committing a crime. Could lose my job, my schooling, my education.
Yeah.
It's just not worth it anymore for me. And in general, I kind of just had a really different relationship to graffiti compared to my peers. I did, get along with several people in the Richmond scene. Looking back now, honestly, this is a conclusion I came to in, the last month. It was a means of, projecting my transness. I got a real kick out of, taking up space in this very hegemonic medium. And I got a real kick out of people would walking by my stuff on the street and be like, oh, a man made that probably because, graffiti. A man does it. You picture, a vandal with a ski mask and that little spray paint can, I'm not saying that graffiti is egocentric, but you know what I'm saying.
I definitely get that.
Yeah. But yeah, it was just a very different point in my life when I was practicing. I didn't have much to lose at the time. I was dealing with a lot of my own personal issues, sobriety, being a teenager in the adult world all of a sudden. It was not a safe or stable time, basically. But it did benefit me for sure. I got into my first group show at 18. I met a lot of super cool people in the scene. And so in a way it was a very tumultuous time, but a lot of blessings came out of it. And that's kind of how I like to think about, the chokes in the road. But yeah, one day I'll extrapolate further about, my experience within graffiti. I just don't want to implicate myself too much.
Definitely, yeah. And of course, I mean, our artistic practices different artistic practices that we have throughout our life can definitely continue to inform without still being totally relevant or totally true necessarily.
Yeah.
And I still see that in some of your work. Here's another question that I've been dying to ask. What's your cultural or regional background?
So I'm first gen. My family is fresh off the boat, or I guess you could say airport, nowadays, from Russia. And that informs a lot of just my lived experience in general. And it's something that I've been thinking about a lot in just almost the last 3 months as I've dealt with a lot of family stuff and just talking with other immigrants in my community. I used to be really embarrassed about labeling myself as Russian. I thought that, if people would look at me, they wouldn't get the nuance that I'm not, a fucking nationalist.
Yeah.
Because a lot of Russian Americans are, surprisingly. They never dispel that, Russian Orthodox, traditionalist mindset that's imparted on them by their parents. But thankfully, I guess, I don't know, my gayness separated me from that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it does like influence my experience with everything, my queerness, how I just navigate the world as a person. It affected, you know, my upbringing, alienation, and just, you know, yeah, it's something I'm still thinking about a lot. And I'm actually, for a book republishing project for one of my studio classes, I'm heading into like a thesis of Russian queer disclosure. So it's something I'm definitely thinking about a lot. But yeah, I'm Russian. I'm coming out. Sorry, guys.
It's awesome.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Some of my favorite Russian artists. Do you know Yegor Letov?
I don't.
Or Yanka?
I don't.
You should check them out. They're musicians.
Do you know who's Russian? Earth Eater and Krayshawn.
I did not know that Earth Eater was Russian.
Earth Eater's Russian. I think, actually. Earth Eater might be Ukrainian. Don't cite me on that. But
okay.
Russian or just like Slavic people who come to America in general are always on some crazy shit. So sometimes I'm like, I'm one of them.
Yeah. How does that that kind of first gen perspective influence like working with people in the program at VCU and just people in Richmond in general?
There's a good body of other immigrants in general at VCU, and I think just Virginia in general, because, you know, DC's right there. So, I don't know, I've found that a lot of other immigrants sanitize themselves, and I haven't met a lot of immigrant queers, surprisingly, which is kind of sad, because we have a lot to talk about. But, you know, I recently had this critique in my studio class, and I found other immigrants, you know, sanitizing themselves or putting blanket statements over their articulation of their immigrant experience, and I was just like, what the fuck, guys? We need to be more overt, especially with the current state of, you know, being an immigrant in the United States. Like, I want immigrants to be louder. And I know it is so fucking hard. Like I mentioned, it's been really hard for me to deal with my shame of just being Russian and existing in a different context compared to Americans. But it's something I would really like to see. I want to see more immigrants speak up. I want to see more queer immigrants speak up, because we're the fucking backbone.
Definitely. Literally what America is built upon.
Exactly.
Yeah. This is kind of an off the wall question.
Yep.
But what's your ideal color for interior lighting?
Kind of basic, but just like a warm yellow. It can be moody or cozy, but I hold a very specific nostalgia for green banker's lamps, because growing up, my grandma would always have like just the Russian TV channel going, and whatever, like, I guess legal lawyer show was on, I always saw a green banker's lamp on the set, and I have a nostalgia for that.
Interesting.
Yeah, I need to get one.
You should get one. But we kind of touched on this a little bit already. Mm-hmm. But specifically, what can you learn about queer identity through research versus experience? Because some things I'm sure cannot be learned through research, and some things cannot be learned through experience.
Research helped me make sense of my experience. It made me feel a lot less alone. Yeah, I guess, you know, it's really hard to find your experience mirrored in the modern day, honestly, I feel like. Again, queerness is so sanitized in the big social media zeitgeist. That's why I say get off your fucking phone, you know? Stop listening to these 20-year-old queer TikTok influencers who are talking about their colonialist, you know, American queer ideals. Like, it pisses me off, and that's why I get so hard in my research. But yeah, I'm careful to, like, not impart this burden of, like, being a queer research messiah, because I do feel like I'm getting to the point where more people are seeing this jargon I put out on social media, and they put me on a pedestal, and it's like, guys, I'm not the patron saint of queer theory. I'm not a queer theory influencer. I'm just a regular person trying to make sense of my experience through research, and I hope putting out my research helps you make sense of your experience, you know? Mm-hmm. You know, I do it all to resonate with others. I call it bite-sized criticality, you know? I encourage you to investigate it further in your own volition. But yeah, it's just been a lot of fun to just be more open, I guess, because for a long time, my visual language in my design was all this poetry. I had the exhilaration of writing out, but I didn't want people to read it. But now I'm like, I guess, I hate to use the word crazy to describe myself, but, I'm being very open and crazy on social media about stuff I used to hide in letter forms.
Yeah. Being saying what you mean exactly and not kind of changing it to be more like clickable, likable.
Yeah.
That is really important, I think, if you want to reach anyone through social media, which is, I think, the point of social media.
Yeah.
And just being genuine on social media is so rare these days, and I see it so much with your queer research and just even the little blurbs that you post on your story.
I thought it would alienate me for the longest time. Like, I remember when I first started posting it, I was so scared. But I get people, like, genuinely, like, telling me thank you, or they'll be like, hey, you should check this out. I've gotten a lot of cool resources from other queer people. It's been great. It's not what I thought it would be transpiring as right now at all.
Yeah. Kind of going off of that a little bit. I see a lot in your research and your work about transgression as a concept. And how is that important to your understanding of feminism and queerness?
I've just been a transgressive person all my life, both by just my nature and the choices I made. Going back to, like, talking about background, I don't exist entirely under the American queer experience, or the mainstream feminist canon, because I'm non-binary. And this was really hard for me to realize for several years. There wasn't a word. I didn't know the word transgression until, like, 2 years ago. And, I was reading all this theory. I was reading Dworkin. I was, like, I wasn't, like, in tune or, like, a part of RadFem TikTok, but I would see content from RadFem TikTok, and I was just consuming all this information, and I was like, I still don't have the answers, and I don't know why. Again, my relationship and sexuality is very informed by my immigration status. And again, going back to, like, how I could pinpoint the answer, I couldn't connect with these white women on social media who were peddling all this radfem bullshit. And, these queers who can't recognize their privilege, white queers I'm talking about. But yeah, I feel like, transgression, I feel like, is a blanket statement for some people. It's really just about, transgression is a practice, I will say. It's not just,
it's
nothing,
like a verb.
Nothing is inherently radical when you think about it. Nothing is inherently transgressive when you think about it. We're all humans frolicking in nature. It's just about how you justify it.
Definitely. And to kind of give the listeners some sort of context, how would you define transgression, just, like, in a short definition?
That's a very hard question, actually. Transgression is a practice, like I said. You're dispelling some sort of hegemonic system. For me, a really funny example of transgression is I'm very clearly a butch lesbian, but I flag myself openly as a bottom, and I know that tricks people out, and that is transgressive. I'm dismantling the hegemonic standard that, a butch lesbian has to be a top. Go crazy, get wild. I'm not going to police transgression.
Absolutely. I feel like that's a pretty good example, definition, as you will.
Yeah, get crazy with it.
Absolutely. What are some of your favorite books or writings?
In terms of queer theory, I recently was looking at the Gender Fail Reader in VCU Special Collections. It's, like, just a running anthology of queer writing, queer poetry, queer theory. Excellent work. Literally, like, one of the former VCU professors who was in the design department was a writer on it, which was funny. So lots of local talent, definitely. It's based out of New York.
How far back does that go?
It's a new publication. I'd say it's only a couple years old.
Okay.
But in general, Internet Archive has a good collection of
I love
queer
Internet
zines.
Archive.
But also, I need to link this, like, publicly on social media. There is a trans-Pacific repository of media I think it's like literally like the Trans Media Data Center or something. They've got a huge collection of queer zines as well that are trans specific. But yeah, I have to mention xenofeminism. They have a manifesto on their website. Their website's very well built. It's got theory, readings, critiques all over it in many different languages. And they also have their manifesto published, which I have a physical copy of. And going off of that, also, the Cyber Feminist Index is sort of like the same thing. Functions very interestingly as a publication, but I won't get into that. But yeah, in general, I recommend visiting your local indie bookstore / library. Stop going to Barnes & Noble. Stop going to Amazon. Stop using Goodreads.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Agony Books in Richmond is great for like special editions and niche emerging artists. And yeah, your library, VCU library, you know, it's free for certain hours. So check that out for sure. They've got a huge queer sociology collection.
Absolutely. Public libraries are, I feel like, some of the last, like, true repositories of knowledge, and nobody uses them.
Exactly, y'all. Get a library card so you can use Canopy and watch really cool films.
Yes, please. What, in your opinion, is the biggest problem with the graphic design industry, and what is the best thing about it now? So that's kind of like two questions sandwiched into one.
Well, I'm not part of said industry yet. I'm still undergrad.
Yeah.
But it's something I think about a lot in terms of navigating academia. I'm a very academic person, you know, all my research and all that. Yeah, I have a lot of issues, you know, part of it's my own gripes with being in the public art school system. Very different experience academically compared to, say, a private art school. I'm
Definitely.
a RISD reject, y'all, but that's because I bullshitted my application, honestly.
I also applied there.
Yep. I hated the challenge. It's so dumb. Anyways, but yeah, I talk about expanding literacy a lot on social media, and again, I mentioned I kind of want to help with that. I think other people in our generation specifically have a hard time engaging in literacy because of their privilege. They don't have to think deeply about their day-to-day because of their own personal circumstances, and that's where this dissonance forms, because they don't need to practice literacy because they don't need to, or we're never given the tools to do so. And this is where my gripe within hegemony, within the academic design canon comes in. You know, students aren't being effectively taught to critically investigate the world around them. Like, the fact that I'm a rarity, that I go to the library, that I go to JSTOR to inform my work is crazy to me. Yeah, I'm just seeing a lot of really boring, baseless work. And it's sad because, one, the library is like 5 steps away from where I have classes. And two, you know, I feel bad that people are wasting all their money on this tuition that they're not taking full advantage of. But yeah, I'm trying to, it's not the entirely the designer's fault that they're bad or baseless or boring. It's how design is taught. And that's why I want to become a professor and get my master's when I grow up.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, but, you know, how can we prioritize the research-based design process for everyone? And who does that responsibility rely in? And how do we make this research process actually engaging? Because I know when I say research, a lot of people are like, what the fuck? I don't want to read a PDF. I'm not going to JSTOR, but it can be anything. You know, a degree program is meant to prepare students for the real world, and I'm not seeing students around me prepare for the real world.
Absolutely. I mean, in most of my design classes, we have the same issue of like lack of basis, lack of research at JMU. And pretty much the only context that I've been given for like the history of graphic design is just by personally being friends with my professors who will lend me books from their personal libraries.
Our design theory class is taught entirely through Zoom, which I think is a horrible medium for a history class. Like, what the heck? Yeah, that's a gripe I forgot to mention. But in terms of like the good, I guess, not to sound egocentric or narcissistic, but the cream of the crop always rises to the top. Through unfortunately, there's not many people who research in my department or do the work that I do, and that's made me stand out to my professors who do know what they're doing. I'm getting connected to an independent study right now, which is really cool. I'm on a different relationship level with my professors compared to my peers. I'm very close with a lot of my professors, and that opens doors for me. So hard work pays off, and it's not just how well you can typeset a poster or how Pinterest friendly your website is. It's using your brain.
Yeah.
The other brains will find you. It's like, a brain-to-brain telepathic opportunity vessel.
Definitely. I see a lot of, this is kind of related to this lack of basis in design. I see a lot of designers in my program who, they were just studio artists whose parents were go into graphic design because you can make money that way. And I feel like that mindset is what kills the drive for research.
Yes, exactly. And research doesn't necessarily even mean going to the library and checking out a book. This is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. The process of making in itself is research. The methods and the materials, how paper feels when you print on it, how the text looks on it, that's research. When you go through all that trial and error, it's sort of like you can apply that painting, studio art research mindset to graphic design. But I'm not saying that it'll always be successful,
Yeah.
For, I guess, VCU, my parallel to that statement is a lot of these people like to draw Naruto in their high school notebooks and thought they could make it in art school.
Yes. I see a lot of that as well. What are your 3 favorite works of visual art? This is a really difficult question, so if you can't completely
I wrote
answer
it down.
It's okay.
Christian Jankowski is a really good contemporary artist. He's been at it for a long time. He is so multimedia, it's insane. But one work that really stood out to me when I was investigating him freshman year was this piece called Traveling Artist, where basically he had himself and his belongings suspended with shibari. And this made me just really interested in shibari as bodily sculpture, and what its allegorical use entails. And basically it was all about, traveling artists, the burden of being an artist in the modern day. It was really interesting to look at. It's just a little photo project you can see on his website. But his work overall is really cool.
Did you get to see that in person, or was it just
No,
photos?
I didn't. It was just an independent research thing for a class. But yeah, lots of really cool work. Christian Jankowski, a great contemporary. One of my previous drawing professors freshman year, I've mentioned him before in a previous podcast, but Michael Royce has a really great new American painting style. When I first looked at his work, his piece, You're in My Blood Like Holy Wine, really stood out to me because I was really into illuminated manuscripts at the time. And so I was like, holy crap, this is amazing. All of his work in general is so beautiful. Again, new American painting in general, I get so happy when I see it because everyone in that scene is so talented. And Michael is just a hoot and a holler overall. I'm always so excited to see what new work comes out of him. He's a queer artist as well. So yeah, charming and memorable is how I would describe Michael Royce's work.
Yeah.
And I always have to talk about my best friend, Zach Montgomery, because he's a fellow graphic design genius, I guess you could say. He's my ride or die, the left arm to my right arm. He did this for our coding class midterm. He made a fake conspiracy theory about a Richmond smell. And he made a website basically called richmondsmell.com. It's still up, by the way. People should check it out. It's really well built. But to promote it, he made these signs in quotation marks. They were plastic bags with Richmond Smell printed all over them. And inside,
I'm looking at it right now.
He put a bunch of dirty cigarette water in cigarette butts and hung it up. And what he did was he took a photo of one of these posters, plastic bag posters, and put it on the RVA subreddit. And it was like, guys, what's going on? There's these weird cigarette posters all over Richmond. And it got, like, semi-viral on the RVA subreddit.
Wow.
and that got a lot of inputs to his cigarette website, and I just thought that was so genius.
This is incredible.
Yeah, it is beautiful.
A multifaceted project, truly.
Yeah, it was just an absolutely amazing and genius way to engage the audience with that project. So yeah, I guess y'all, it can be really funny to be a graphic designer.
Yeah, it's awesome that the program kind of, it seems like it allows to have room for that sort of exploration. If you like.
Graphic design is very conceptual.
I'm a little bit jealous. What are some of your favorite words?
I've been using the word zeitgeist a lot. I love zeitgeist. Bitch is just like my favorite swear word, or I guess derogatory term.
It's a really solid word.
Yeah. And also I've been using clapper a bit more lately. Like, I'll say this is clapped. This is totally clapper. It can be good or bad. I think it's because I was rewatching Dairy Girls. Best show ever, by the way. And then also snatch, because I don't really like the word pussy.
It's perfect. It's a perfect word. This is another question coming from me looking at all your art on Instagram. I noticed some recurring visual patterns in your art. Long Pinocchio-like noses on figures, deconstructed type, spikes, etc. Do these motifs have any symbolism to you? Are they purely ornamental? And I know some of these may be dated. But
no, it's so fine, because I recently had someone be like, you should get back into painting, and I'm like, in the summer I will when I don't have school. But yeah, there is a reason for it all. Other than just, wanting to burn my art into someone's eyes like they looked at the TV screen for too long. I've come to terms with the fact that I'm a poet. The lettering is where, I started, basically, getting known as this Marty style. I liked writing out poetry, but I didn't want people to necessarily read it, because writing shit out that is vulnerable is scary. But still, I wanted to impart my emotions onto the viewer. A lot of people will say that there's a certain energy or movement to my work, and that's the goal with this crazy lettering, I guess. My piece, Temporary Like the Bastards to Inspire Me, which got me into my first group show, is definitely a bold proclamation in terms of, content and, the title of it. And I think it's a really good example of how I manifested this poetry into, the visual language that it is. But yeah, I would say I've been told a lot that my art looks like Cuphead, and I'm like, fuck you. I've never even played that game. Actually, God. I'm heavily inspired by Soviet illustrator Ivan Bilbin, so you're wrong. I just grew up seeing a lot of his work. He's a Soviet folk illustrator. I just got tattoos of his iconic harpies on my chest. His work is just so flabbergastingly beautiful. He does all this beautiful, ornate line work with these nature scenes, and these beautiful illustrative borders all around the illustrations, but flat colors. So there's this crazy layering that's going on compositionally. It's very storybook. It's very magical. He doesn't do a little, but he does a lot with how simple the composition is. There's no crazy shading. It's all in the line work, and I think it's just his images are permanently engraved in my brain, and I think everyone should look at them because they make me feel something.
I will definitely check that out.
Yeah.
Sometimes I feel like the motifs that we develop in art and media are really just kind of stealing from other people, little bits, and putting them together.
You're not always stealing. It's influence.
Next question. What are some areas of your design practice that you hope to grow in?
Modes of creation in general. I've always been a hobbyist. I want to get into woodworking. I want a soldering iron. I want to learn to crochet. I want to do everything. But realistically, I can't, sadly. But yeah, just, how can I make my design work go beyond a book, a poster, a website? How can I make it more tangible? I've been really into screen printing lately. I'm taking a letterpress class right now, which is really cool. I think it's just in my nature as someone who's an illustrative background kind of person. I'm happiest in general when I find that perfect balance between making something on a computer and making it tangible at the end of the day. And the independent study I mentioned earlier is with the printmaking department at VCU, so that'll get interesting if I get it. A lot of interesting work will come out of it. Hopefully
Definitely.
I get it, fingers crossed, yeah. But yeah, just, I hate saying this word, but being more hands-on is always really great.
Definitely. Not to talk about myself too much, but
No, you're so fine.
I've gone to design school. I applied, I got into graphic design, and then immediately the semester after I got in, I fell in love with lithography, which is another form of printmaking.
Oh my
of course.
gosh, yes.
And I seriously, there was a point in my sophomore year where I considered just dropping graphic design and just pursuing printmaking, because it is such a tangible, like, process-oriented way to discover design.
Yes. I wish VCU had a printmaking minor. I say it all the time.
I wish JMU did.
Come on, get on it.
Please. And kind of going into the tangibility part of design. What are some of your, like, when you were looking for influences for kind of tangible design, what are some of your favorite touchable pieces of design that inspire you?
Go to the library, y'all. I hate seeing people first go to Pinterest for layout inspiration, because you're just gonna recreate what you see on the internet that was made by someone like, 2 to 5 years ago. Why not go to the library and just look at a real book? Like, for a manifesto project I made, I specifically went on eBay to look for old Soviet literature to study the layout, because, getting old Soviet literature is kind of hard in the library system. So that was an interesting caveat away from, going on Pinterest. But yeah, get off your phone, y'all. Read a book.
Absolutely.
Look at a real life poster, maybe.
Yes, if you can find one.
Yeah.
This is a question about a movie that I watched because you recommended it.
It's my favorite movie.
It's really good. And I've showed it to a few people, and they've all loved it too.
Awesome.
So, Wetlands. How do you interpret the imagery in this movie, like the avocado seeds, the Catholic symbolism, blood, etc.?
To start off, I just got the original copy of the book translated into English, so I need to read that. Very excited to see how the book is different from the film. I'll probably write like an analysis on it or something. But for me, the themes of like bodily abject hit the hardest. I relate to the footage of her playing with like her medical waste, eating various bodily fluids, throwing up on a rat post-drug binge, and keeping it as a pet was really funny. She's just the most disgusting young woman ever, right in your face, and I love it. And it's beyond just being an open depiction of her sexuality, she's just being gross, like picking her nose.
Yeah.
And I would say Helen's mother is often discounted in the film. I think she serves as a great allegory for notions of purity. She's like a very controlling force and influence in her life. And I love the way her mother's just written through the film. I think it's so genius. But yeah, in simple terms, young women are so disgusting, and I really resonate with that.
Absolutely.
And again, more people need to watch it. And, transgression is inherently tied to disgust and grotesque. I've been really into the idea of the fetishization of nonconformity as of late, relating to my own lived experience. But without saying too much about a future project, I'm getting more grotesque. And I think it's really beautiful how everyone can watch Wetlands and resonate with a different depiction of the grotesque. And yeah, that's why I always try to recommend it to people too.
Absolutely. Definitely. And kind of part of it that resonated with me so much is like, when I am around a lot of other women, I often feel a little bit gross compared to them, because I grew up in a way that was very like you shower when you want to, you don't
Yes.
shave. Like, shaving is a contemporary, like, thing, and I don't know, it just really resonated with me to see a movie where that was just, like, it was just normal.
Yeah. She was just doing it.
Absolutely. What is something you think everyone should try, make, or do?
I think community is more important than ever. I've been practicing gratitude a lot more the last, 6 months of my life. And every day I'm so grateful for my friends and community in general. So I think more people should try showing up for each other. It's more important than ever, especially in today's political climate. And going to, this idea of gathering, something that I've just been thinking a lot about as the weather warms up is I want more people to make food for their friends. We need to have more barbecues. We need to have more dinners.
Yep.
We need to feed each other and gather. And if I had infinite money, I would host dinners all the fucking time. Because having dinner is awesome. So yeah, I think everyone should make that happen.
Absolutely.
And then just going back to what I've been saying through this whole conversation, everyone needs to do more research. Research isn't boring. If it was boring, I wouldn't be doing all this. And anything can be research. It can be taking up a new hobby. It can be watching a film. It can be reading a book. And, to reiterate on, literacy, especially for creative people, art gets really boring when there's no important shit behind it. So, it gets really boring when people bandwagon onto, the baseless trends that are going on. What hot new t-shirt design trend, what poster design trend, what typesetting trend is going on. I just want everyone to have a reason because it's for the best.
Absolutely. And sometimes I think that community and bringing people together, that often is the reason. That often is an informant for our art. And if you don't have, if you don't actively seek out community, sometimes it can just fall short because the community that you're getting is kind of it just happens to you. I think actively seeking it out can create different things.
Mm-hmm. The people around you are beautiful. You should talk to them.
Please. What is a question you wish people would ask you?
I'm a pretty open book. I don't have a specific question in mind. I just wish people would engage in dialogue with me more than just liking my stories. Because, my DMs are open, and I've mentioned this before. Y'all, my DMs are a third space for discourse, criticality, correcting me if I'm wrong, definitely. Mm-hmm. And, I won't back down from conversation about anything. Maybe, this is the case because not everyone can articulate their literacy, and that's so fine. I'm going to impart that burden on you. But yeah, I say, don't DM me a dissertation question about a specific thing on theory. Don't DM me asking me about your girl troubles or, trying to project your queer tragedy onto me. That's just, a boundary I want to set real quick. But other than that, I'm chill with anything else. Let's shoot the shit.
Absolutely. That's what we're doing right now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. I think that we've pretty much covered everything that I was really curious about. But I cannot guarantee that I will not be asking you more questions in your DMs after I listen through this and process it a little bit more. The language that you use sometimes is a little hard for me to understand.
That's
you're
okay.
All good. That's okay. I really appreciate it, and I appreciate your informedness and how genuine you are.
Yeah, I really appreciate you for having me on. I love talking about this kind of stuff, and I think this is a good way to sort of get my praxis thesis out in a concise way.
Wonderful. If we could just end by, if you want to say ways for listeners to contact you if they're interested or keep up with you.
I'm most active on my Instagram, Martystasis. I have an arena channel that I've slowly been building an archive of queer theory and just transgressive media in general on. I'll probably link that on my Instagram one day. It's a work in progress.
Yeah.
And I'm also on Letterboxd if you're interested in my bite-sized criticality. I watch a lot of queer films. I'm curating a list of must-watch transgressive media, right now. So if you ever just like want to hear offshoot opinions on like films and, you know, me being funny, that's where I'm at.
Absolutely. Well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.